When the credits start rolling, but the movie keeps haunting you.
Before, after.
Then it's time to tune in to Dismembering Horror. We'll talk about what worked and also what didn't. We'll dissect every aspect. Maybe some we shouldn't.
He turned out to be a completely unreliable asshole.
Take it away, boys.
Hello, Tim.
Hello, Ryan. Oh.
And we just touched fingers. We're in the same room. And hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Means a lot. As our wonderful introduction lady just said, here is Dismembering Horror, episode 183 of Dismembering Horror. And today we are dismembering the Brandon Cronenberg joint, Possessor.
Yep. Possess her.
Oh, yeah.
Hey.
She possesses.
Coming off the back of, well, not exactly, but 2 films ago. Cronenberg, a daddy Cronenberg.
Yeah, no, we had our friend Alex on for Crimes of the Future, Cronenberg Sr.'s latest film. And Alex reminded us, oh yeah, Possessor, da-da-da. And Tim and I are like, oh yeah, well, we were going to do that for this show. So we were like, let's finally watch it and talk about it. So here we are.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, to get into it further, we like to set the stage here with a trailer. So let's watch it and we'll be right back with you. So here we go. From 2020, written, directed by Brandon Cronenberg, Possessor.
You have a very special nature. One we've worked hard together to unlock. Pull me out. The results are normal. Anything you want to flag? No, I'm fine. Mom! Hi, darling.
How was your trip?
Dull. Extraordinarily dull. Our next contract's a big one. The target is the CEO of the largest operation in the U.S. He'll be binding to Colin Tate. We can't afford any mistakes on this one.
Ready?
What's with you today?
What do you mean?
All right, Tim, I would love to know, per our rating system, would you tell your past self who had not seen this film to avoid, stream, rent, or just go ahead and buy it?
I would rent this movie. There's just a couple things that didn't quite land right for me, that kept it out of the buy realm. But I enjoyed it. It's cool. It's visually like quite cool. Like I was really into the style of it. I think that there's some story elements that just don't quite happen, or they don't get to where I would like them to, I guess, maybe. But other than that, everybody's really good in it, and I it's almost a buy, but not quite.
Cool. I'll second that as far as the rent rating for myself. I was actually thinking maybe it was just kind of mood I've been in of late, but when I was watching it, I was feeling more like this is great, so I would totally stream it for whatever reason. Like maybe just my standards just happen to be there right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just kind of have to figure it out as we go here, why maybe that wasn't higher. But sort of actually why I say rent it is I did end up renting it just because I was at the video store
Which video store?
Videotech in Pasadena.
The Videotech
in South Pasadena.
Mm.
Saw it was 4K. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I have some rentals in my account left. I'll check it out. And I'm glad I did because I realized there's different versions. This is the uncut one that I rented.
That's what I watched as well, the uncut.
Okay,
one.
so is that way on Hulu too?
Yep.
Cool, great. So okay, so then maybe I wouldn't have to rent it to get the uncut version. That's kind of where I was going with it. But yeah, there was enough going on in it that pushed it to a rent, which I'll get into. But before that, what the heck are we even talking about? Just to help you, and we hope you've seen the film, but if not, you're welcome all the same. Just help us all get on the same page here. And this is full spoilers, if you like and use that term.
Yeah.
Tim, what was this film? What happened in Possessor?
Okay. This film is it's a sci-fi thriller with, some horror undertones, I would say. I would put it more in the thriller genre for sure. But the basic premise is there is a organization of some sort, clandestine organization, that has the technology to insert one human's consciousness into another human's consciousness. And they do this in a sort of espionage way where they have targets that they want to have carry out some sort of crime or murder or whatever for their own gain, or maybe they have clients as well. Do they have clients? Did it seem like they're working for somebody, or they're like just this in the shadows organization? I
guess
know.
Either way, they would have clients of some kind.
Right.
So,
like it benefits somebody.
Yeah.
Some secret whatever.
I saw it more as like it was all sorts of corporate espionage.
Yeah. I agree. That's what it feels like. So it's like job per job basis kind of thing. So they get hired, I guess, to carry out these acts, whatever they may be. In this case, we have our main, I don't know what we should call them, jumpers or
possessors.
Possessors. Let's call them possessors. That's a good idea. So you've got your main possessor, who is named, what is her name?
Tasia Voss.
Oh yeah, Tasia. And she's given a job. We meet her before we meet her, when she's already inside of a woman who carries out a very gruesome stabbing of some fat, rich guy, presumably. And it's quite over the top. What do they call that? Overkill. She stabs him unnecessarily many, many times. And then when she tries to kill herself with a gun, she can't pull the trigger, and the cops kill her instead. So we find out that Tasia, the possessor, was inside of that woman's body carrying out that murder, and that she's having some trouble. The lines of her consciousness are like right on the edge of being blurred when she's going in and out of the people that she's possessing. When she comes out, she has to go through kind of like a Blade Runner-esque set of questions, and has to reset so that we know that she's good, that she's out. And we meet her family and stuff like that. Not really super important, but the main story is that she gets a job. She has to go into this guy, and this is very like it's spy thrillery stuff. It's like get into him, integrate in his, like, with the people in his life, and then carry out a couple murders so that the head of a corporation, when he dies, somebody else inherits it, and then people who have hired the possessor crew benefit. It's probably more specific than that, but that's the gist. And because of her issues that she's not really being upfront about with her boss, she starts to lose touch while she's on the inside. And stuff starts to kind of fall apart, and she's not really holding it together. And that cascades into a series of sort of domino effect mishaps, and ultimately the control over the body she's possessing swaps to the actual guy's consciousness who she's possessing, and she ends up kind of trapped inside of that, and she has to figure out a way to get out. And she does, sort of.
And I'll say a big kind of conflict point through it is, can she use, by her powers of acting, basically fool all those around? Colin Tate is who she's possessing, is his name. Can she fool everyone around him, the girlfriend, the dad? So that's fun.
Yeah, the coworker.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty simple premise when it comes down to it. There's complications that are a little complicated.
Yeah. Well, that's what's great, not to get ahead of ourselves, but that's what's great. You take a simple setup, it allows you to extrapolate to all sorts of not so simple things.
I mean, I love an espionage spy thriller. It's always like a pretty simple premise, right? Like go get the thing from the safe and get out of there.
And I love body swapping things.
Ooh. Yeah. Didn't David Cronenberg do a body swap movie?
I mean, The Fly, you could...
Well, no.
Really.
What is the one with the twins? Isn't that
That's
Cronenberg?
Dead Ringers.
Is that Cronenberg? Oh yeah, it's not body swapping. It's just two brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, there you go.
All right. Cool. Great job. And this is not so much a summary, but it's just fun to keep track of. Meant to mention this up front. This is our third Andrea Riseborough film for Dismembering Horror. So can you name the other two?
I can. One of them is one of the greatest movies of all time, Mandy. And the other is one of the worst movies of all time, the new 2020 Grudge.
Yep. Our first film we ever saw of the new decade, Tim.
What a disappointment.
And this came out the same year, so it was good to see her in this too, finally.
Yeah.
All right, great. We rated it. We summarized it. Here we go for what worked.
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
I mean, I just mentioned Andrea Riseborough, so just to get the acting out of the way, Tim, I thought was incredible on both of the leads' part, but it was just so funny. It is the kind of performances, I guess this happens in the body swap stories, where I just had the funniest thought, and it just really it just confirmed or that it's what made me realize how good their performances are. But when I was watching him after she possesses him, I thought, wow, she's doing a really good job of acting inside his body.
Yeah. Wow.
And then
amazing.
Then I thought, wait, of course I caught myself. No, that's his performance. He's acting like she's inside.
No, Ryan. They actually have this technology now, and that's what they were doing. That's part of the film.
Yeah.
They had to train for months to get that right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much more to say on it. They're great.
Well, we've seen him as well in Piercing, and he was really good in that. And we liked that movie a lot. And his the actor's name is Chris Abbott? No, that's my friend.
No, it is that. Christopher
Abbott. Oh, weird. Yeah. I have a friend named Chris Abbott.
I think you
Not
said
this
that.
guy. I probably did say it, though. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know if he's considered underrated, but I guess just from the sense that he seems to be in more of these smaller indie films than in anything like, super commercial. Makes me think that he's yet to be kind of discovered, but he's not yet to be discovered, but like he's yet to blow up in a mass way.
Yeah.
But he's so friggin' talented. It's crazy.
Like you could see him in 5 years being in a Marvel movie kind of thing. They always discover the talent. Yeah. How would you describe both of their kind of types or essences that they bring to their roles.
Well, I mean, I've seen him in maybe 3 or 4 things, certainly 3, because he was in It Comes at Night as well. And he so far plays a very similar character in the 3 things I've seen, which is borderline unhinged. Like, so his whole character seems in all 3 movies to be somebody who's on the verge of snapping, but he's holding it together. And that's kind of what I think makes him endearing. Like, his essence is that you feel for him because you know he's really, really trying to not fall apart. And he's able to ride that line. I think that's hard for a lot of actors. It's super challenging to be like right on the cusp of meltdown without going there. But when he does go there, he's very, very like compelling. Like, when he's losing his shit, I buy it. So what is that? What's the answer to your question? His essence is man on the verge.
But something about him's kind of sullen too.
Yeah, that's true. He's got this kind of dark, almost sadness to him. I don't know. I like it though. I mean, I like his essence.
And then for Andrea, our bud, how about her? She's a
little different. I don't know what to think of her.
She feels more like the super intellectual kind. That doesn't necessarily mean like, not to say she isn't smart, but I don't mean intellectual in the term smart. I guess I mean like she's just has a sort of like intensity through the eyes, like
Certainly.
a real presence through the eyes.
She definitely plays characters that seem to. I mean, they all seem wounded or like they're carrying around a lot. But in both The Grudge and this, they also seem like the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting kind of dichotomy that I actually like that a lot because it makes sense. It's like I think it's why we maybe not relate to her, but we like feel for her, is that we go, oh man, if she wasn't burdened, she'd be like crushing it in the world. But because of this burden, she can't quite like actualize as a person, which is a good kind of character trait to have in a film, because not the whole point, but often the point of your lead character, you want to be on the ride to see of whether or not they can actualize. And when they don't, especially because of their quote unquote burden, it's tragic. So she feels really tragic in all of the movies I've seen her in.
Yeah. Well, for this movie, it's weird because it gets into the story a bit, her character story. It doesn't seem like at any point there's any sort of journey or sense of hope for her. It's it's like her life's been captured and she's just being beat down, and it's as if she's aware of it on some level for sure, but doesn't really. It's as if there's literally no hope, so why even bother?
Yeah, there isn't. Yeah, she's got a nihilistic kind of feel to this character for sure, because we never really feel, or I never really felt that she was, there's a very common construct in these types of movies of one more job and then I'm out. And that doesn't really exist in this. She's resigned to the fact that like she's gone too far, and that's kind of it for her. And she's just like, you know what, let's just keep going. Yeah. And that's really depressing.
Well, it is. I kept thinking of, I guess, both in mood, story, and a lot of visuals of THX 1138.
Sure.
In this film, compared to this film, and with that one, it's about someone coming to realize their situation and wanting to escape, versus like we're just saying this reality. It's as if there's no even awareness or idea that one could escape at all. And the difference that is interesting with those stories, it's like they're being all kept just to do the mindless, like other people do in this film, just the kind of drudge work or whatever, being, kept on the drugs and all that. But she has a unique job in this film, which is to kill people. So what I thought was really interesting, just idea-wise, story-wise, thematically in this, was that kind of comparison to, I want to be sensitive to people in the military here, but I just think of military-industrial complex in the sense of maybe, I mean, it's something that's highlighted in a lot of movies, but is definitely real too, of trying to put someone in the mode of it's okay to kill, like trying to numb someone to, it's like what you see them go through.
Yeah.
We assume is real life of like Full Metal Jacket or
Right.
whatever, just beating someone so much that they just are that empathy, whatever it is, that should make them able to prevent them from killing another person. That's beat out of them. So that's, I think, where maybe that hopelessness comes from, is because that's the place she's been put in. Is there's no hope because she lives in a world that's just so far separated because she's been forced into a world where she has to kill without any sort of regret.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I also kind of, maybe there's a thread of connection to what you're saying, that she's a product of exactly what you're talking about, but the result is that she is losing touch with her own sense of self, right? Because every time she goes into another body, she has to kind of integrate and be that person. And if she stays in too long, she loses herself. She loses her ability to come out and retain who she is. And so there's something really interesting to me about that concept of like what that would do to you. And I wonder if there isn't some sort of overt metaphor, whether it be something like what you're describing, or if maybe there's something in the concept of like addiction or something else. Nothing stuck out overtly to me, like it was pointing at a thing, like trying to like say this is the message of the film or anything like that. But I wonder what it could be.
I mean, I just now, maybe I wasn't so much aware of it while watching it, but just the that we use the word a lot, the corporatism exploiting that, the kind that exploits human well-being. And
actually, yeah,
because look at the ending of the film, where she's not, when she doesn't remember the butterfly or whatever, or killing the butterfly at the end anymore, or doesn't care about it, or maybe she's lying and has just accepted this is her fate. Either way, the reaction of her supervisor or whatever, coworker, Jennifer Jason Lee Girder, is, oh, good, you no longer care or remember about your regretful butterfly memories. So, but she's saying it in a way that's not like, oh, good, you're better now, you've recovered from any sort of dangerous memory of sympathy. It's very just, checking by the book, employee has satisfied this, check. Right. Which is, we see elsewhere in the film when he plugs in with the glasses. And what is he's like taking details of the drapes or something like that?
Yeah, I couldn't quite. Maybe it's purposefully obtuse, but like, what is his job? To observe different maybe what it is because he's in this sort of virtual reality realm, and he's watching real people act out real life scenarios in their homes through their webcams. But his job is to detail, like specifically in this case on that day, the curtains.
Okay, well, I didn't
and so what does that, like that monotonous, like what's the point of that job, right? Like it's to some corporate bullshit like checklist thing that you're talking about, right? It's like, it's so irrelevant, but it's like a cog in the wheel.
No, right. That and that's what I was getting to with the example. I didn't mean what he was doing there, but remember how the supervisor comes on his earcom thing and goes, "Keep it up. You're moving at a snail's pace."
Yeah.
It's just like,
It's very Metropolis to me, right? It's like
Mhm.
you got to just keep the gears going. It does make me think that maybe a big part of the undertone of this movie is that corporatism and the disconnect when you sort of sign your life over to that construct. And maybe the commentary is that we are as a society, the risk is that you really do lose touch with some fundamental things like family and connection and intimacy, because a lot of this movie has like these sort of corollaries between sex and violence, which is something we sort of saw in Cronenberg's, his dad's film, The Crimes of the Future. But specifically in that she ends up completely destroying her own family that she had already left, right? Like she left her family, her husband and her kid for this job.
Mhm.
And she, in the beginning, is sort of confused as to the timeline of that and kind of slips up in her interview saying, I've been meaning to like talk with my husband, and Jennifer Jason Leigh is like, well, you're separate. You guys have been separated. And she's like, no, oh, right. Yeah, no, I know that, but we still want to talk, right? So it's like one of the first clues that she's not quite on the level. And to see that end up with her, I mean, it's pretty twisted, with her failings cause the possessed body guy to kill her husband while she's in his body still.
Right.
And Jennifer Jason Leigh possesses her son. And the result is she kills her own son.
Right. But you should say failings there in air quotes, because her failings are being affected by the trauma of having killed all these people.
Yes. Well, right.
I mean, that's what's keeping her, that's what's kind of making her lose control and flash out, is she's getting flashes of these murders she's committed and whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting how, they show everything we're talking about here with her inability, like the way you exit the body is to shoot yourself in the head.
Right.
And something is possessing her that makes her so she can't do it. She just can't pull the trigger. So I don't know. I think that's an interesting way to show on some level she hasn't totally stamped out her humanity of, handing herself over for the job. It's unnatural to do that.
Yeah, to herself.
Yeah.
But the irony being she's able to do it to her family. So this, whatever you want to call it, the company, the influence of the company or corporatism or whatever you want to call it, has made it almost okay for her to be able to destroy her family, but still not be able to, like, I guess her character arc is that she needs to be able to destroy herself and she can't bring herself to do that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty dark and twisted. But I like it. It's cool.
To stay on the story, but shift gears a little bit, just a way to put like what this story is as a what if, and that's a sort of what you use for a setup for a horror premise, is what if when like you have a technology that's messing with your body and your consciousness and how those exist with one another, what happens when that goes wrong? And I just thought that was so cool, and probably my favorite part about this film was like, okay, so we've established you have this future technology of putting someone's consciousness in someone else's body, these weird, funny machines and all that. But what's so fun and what movies do is how do you visualize that going wrong? And that's the best stuff in this movie for me. You visualize it by having it so when he's fighting back, he takes her face off.
I mean, that is by far the moment of the film for me.
I mean, it's the poster image.
Right? Like when he's holding her face and then it collapses in, like it's a beautiful cut, I guess. It's not even, I mean, it is technically a cut, but it's so perfectly executed.
Yeah.
And shocking and like upsetting and disturbing all, like it's so good.
But even then, just, the classic film language, the quick cuts to show what someone's internal experience is. And you have the imagery of like, this was what I wasn't sure if it's in the original cut or not, or if this is only the unrated cut, but like the flash where she has the erect penis over him. Like that stuff was so good. And that the quick flash imagery, it was colors and different, shots of them or whatever. It had a great quality to it that felt like sort of if you're looking at something under a microscope almost, where it had these sort of organic imperfections in the lenses or something that might just be like a little, is that like a mitochondria there? I don't know.
Sure.
These cool little organic touches that was a really good fusing of the technology we're talking about and looking at in the film, as well as this is all an organic thing that's mixing with that. So very good living up to your namesake, Mr. Cronenberg.
Yeah, the color palette of anytime you're inside the mind, those flashes or whatever it may be, is so much more vibrant than the rest of the film. Like most of the coloring in the film is a fairly flat, almost gray tone to it. And though every time you flash in, it's extremely bright, crisp, sharp yellows and blues and reds. And like it's primary colors. It's like really, really well distinguishable between the reality of the film and the inside the brain parts.
Yeah. Because we already mentioned it, because Christopher Abbott and piercing, which we covered, it all visually did remind me of that too.
Yeah.
The cityscapes with all the windows looking in, that red yellow slickness. It's cool. Other things, in the story, just talking about what could you only do in this story, promise of the premise, pursuing potent possibilities, as we like to call it here. Her rehearsing going into his body by spying on him.
Yeah.
So good. And then to have the payoff too of, okay, it's the suspense of when she's first possessed in on him. It's the next morning, and can she fool the girlfriend?
Right. Yeah, that's all great stuff. It's all very, I mean, that to me is the bread and butter of any sort of spy thriller, right? Like the setup of, I've got to learn how to integrate first, like do my research, like figure out who these people are, like what makes them tick. But then they're obviously this is taking it that one step further of, I'm not just like play acting to convince. I'm inside the body, which is just, it's a cool premise.
Like a polyjuice potion or the early Mission Impossible movies.
Right.
Yeah.
It is interesting. It is playing off some pretty funny Mission Impossible tropes.
Sure.
Even with him putting her face mask on inside his brain. Oh my God. It does sort of harken back to that.
Yeah. And just to mention it too, because it was so great, definitely what worked within all that part of those sequences. I called it like the lights out scene. Remind me of that short film that was turned into a feature. Just that, when the light clicks off, and what did they call it? It's something I forgot. But
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's not the gateway. I don't know. Something.
It's The Grudge.
It's not a grudge, but it's whatever they call it when they like flick the switch that's flicking like their two realities together. And it's when that's when we shift to the totally red vision, is when we're flashing to her. And then to have her walk in on his shot. That was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. This like almost, I don't know what you would call it. It's kind of, we used this, what is it called? It's a type of lens trick where your lens, you put like a thing on the lens, and it creates this really interesting fall off where like only a particular spot in the frame is in focus and everything else falls away from that, out of focus. Can't remember the term for it. But in those dreamy sort of in the brain sequences, they use that kind of thing or something to that effect. And you get really beautiful lens flaring going on. And like, it's just I just think it's such a uniquely pretty photography to look at, you know, like, and I think that's really important when you're doing a film that needs to distinguish essentially realms, right? Like this is the inside the brain realm, and it has to feel different than the outside real world.
Yeah. What did it do for you? Did it work for you? And what did it do for you? How they fell on that kind of shooting style a lot, where you have someone like, rather than being here in the frame, if it's this kind of shot, they'd kind of be on the opposite as what you typically frame.
Like short-sighting them?
Is that what's called?
Yeah. That has become so much more common that I almost don't even notice it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like a few years ago, I think I would have been like, whoa, that feels weird, or that seems off, or whatever. I mean, even in like TV shows, I'm seeing it a ton. I noticed it a lot in the show Sex Education.
Okay.
Which I was like, and it did stick out to me, which was a few years ago, where I was like, whoa, they're short-sighting almost every scene.
And the way I can describe that, because I kind of did it with my hands for Tim here, but it's like when the direction of that they're looking with their eye line, there's less camera space there.
Right. That's
it's
the
more
short
behind
side.
them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So typically, if you were on the, let's say, the left of frame, like the left third of frame, the actor would be looking through that space on the middle to right third of the frame.
So what does it do for you?
I think it's being used for this really specific purpose, because what it does is it makes us feel like there's more of an intensity. Like the person's face is looking off screen, but there's no space in between where they're looking. And so I think just psychologically, it gives us this feeling of discomfort and intensity. And I for a movie like this, that to make that choice makes total sense, right? It feels slightly disorienting without like breaking any sort of like rules of where people are in space. It doesn't confuse us, but it makes us feel off, which is, I think, you don't want to get too crazy and then suddenly like we can't even catch up with where people are. I never felt that in this, which is kind of a testament to how effective it's working, because I was never confused. So those techniques are obviously working, but I think it just adds this weird sense of discomfort and tension.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like anybody who says like you shouldn't do that, stop saying stuff like that.
Who said that?
I think people go, well, like that's not how you're supposed to shoot a scene, because like you don't want to short sight everybody in every shot. It's like, but I do.
I always love the imaginary naysayers in your head, Tim.
They exist.
What else worked for you here about this film?
In particular, it's a jealousy thing. In a good way. It's an envy thing, not a jealousy thing. The knife going into the neck of the dude in the first scene, and the sort of revisiting of that visual and how it's shot and how visceral it is exactly what I wanted in the short film that I'm finishing right now.
You with that.
And I was like, they did it so good. Like it's so much. It's so exactly what I was trying to accomplish and didn't ever quite get, and had to kind of work around and figure out a solution visually to sell that. But watching them do it and revisit it a bunch of times was like, every time I saw it, I was like, God, no, that's how you do it, man, damn. And then to have, in a story sense, her son do the same to her at the end, the payoff of that was exceptional to me. Like, I love connectivity in story, like especially visual connectivity, right? Like where you get these kind of recalls, or is recall the right word? These sort of callbacks, I guess, or repeated refrains, like that come through, and then finally you get a payoff that like makes it all make sense. There's just something about that style that is really pleasing to me. I was really, I was keyed into the idea early on that somebody else was going to show up and be a possessed person. But I was constantly being like, oh, it's going to be this guy. Oh, it's going to be that guy. Like I thought Eddie, for example, when this character, Eddie, who's like a coworker, shows up at sort of a intense moment and helps her inside the body, helps her out. And I immediately was like, oh, somebody's inside of Eddie. This is this is all plant and whatever. And it turns out that's not exactly right. Eddie was a plant, but he's not possessed. He's just working for the corporation or whatever. And so I think actually what it did, which is super, super smart, is it got me and hopefully other people watching it thinking about that possibility. But then when we know that he's not possessed, but we know that the company has people everywhere, we're going, oh, okay, so maybe it's somebody else, maybe it's coming. And having it be her son is like the best option imaginable. And not one that I would have guessed.
I know. It was such a trip getting that visual of violence both happening to and being committed by a child, but layered onto, oh no, this isn't a child at the same time. It's really just...
Well,
yeah.
It also, I think this theme of like influence and how we, like humans, seem to think that they have permission to influence either other people or other beings or whatever, right? Like that they can kind of just do whatever they want. They point at it a couple times, obviously with the butterfly being like, oh, I killed this and I mounted it myself. Like nobody else does that, right? Like no other being does that. Humans do that, where they say, oh, I can kill this thing for no real reason other than to say that I did it and then display it and be proud of that display. That's really twisted.
It's weird, right?
Right? Like if you kind of step back and go, wait, why do we do that? Why do we feel compelled to do that at all? I mean, it's an ego thing, I guess, or like wanting to feel like what we're like we can I mean, it's really arrogant.
Well, it's a sadistic urge that I think like exists in humans, in us all, but it's just one that like so many things, sadistic urges, you could just call them that because they're societal wide, they have been accepted as, okay, this is just normal. Pose with the deer or the lion or the rhino you killed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, the animal thing too, like there's that clip that they're showing of electronic stim being inserted into a bull, and they are seeing if they can get, this is like old archival footage that they're showing, and they're seeing if they can get the bull to not charge at the matador. And they do, right? Like they arrest its movement by, sending this electromagnetic shock into the bull's body, into its brain, presumably, which is obviously, a connection to what we're seeing in this film, right? They're putting some sort of diode or whatever into the brain of the possessed person. And again, like it's this concept of like, humans have this tendency to come up with an idea and then without really maybe thinking too much of whether or not they should, they just do it because they think they can.
Right, because it's been normalized.
Yeah, right. And it's I mean, really at the end of the day, it's just a methodology for control. Like I can do this, so I'm going to, is really the same as just saying, I want control over my, desires,
or just reality.
Right.
Yeah, it's a yeah, because it's weird. It's not like about control, like I need to control everything. It's that like, why people will say like people like to get tattoos or whatever, it's which is cool. I like tattoos, but yeah, just that kind of taking control.
It's a perversion of agency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Like we all should have agency and be able to do things that we deem desirable, I guess. But at what cost, right? Like if you pervert that to a certain extent, you eliminate the consideration for everything else and everyone else.
Like sewing over your ears and eyes and sewing ears all over your body.
Yeah.
Or your mouth and eyes, I meant to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a really fun visual to pick apart too. This is from Crimes of the Future. In so many ways, metaphorically, right? Like to say I'm sure they weren't thinking this, but I'm all ears and no sight or speech, right?
Yeah.
Is a pretty poignant thing to say that I'm gonna do that for what, right? Like for this, and this is I think a good question for all art. Like, do you need to have a reason? Like, what's your intention? And sometimes the answer is no. Like, it's not for the artist.
Yeah. How do we get here?
I don't know.
Okay, because
I had 2 cups of coffee like right before we started, and I'm just super excited to talk philosophically.
Well, great, me too as always. But to reel it back a bit, just when you were talking about some of the violence in this,
yeah, that's my
the
big
extreme
last thing.
stabbing. I mean, it was relentless, like the stabbing, but then also the killing of Sean Bean. And again, I don't know if this was just in the uncut
he doesn't
version.
Die.
Oh, right.
Which is even crazier. Like
Right.
we were watching it, and then he shows up later and he's like bandaged up, and we're like,
Of course.
wait, what? How is he not dead?
Do you think he
got
has
his
in
eyeball
his
poked
contract
out.
now? Like he can't die.
Yeah, he can no longer be the most killed actor on the planet.
Be brought to the verge of death. But actually that's actually an example of kind of what I wanted to bring up about the violence and how I think it's super justified for the story and themes, where it's like when, he's not getting killed, but when he's getting maimed, of like the teeth being like shoved out and then his eye getting like gouged out, and you get that quick shot of it. But then even better, the idea that he survives that all. For me, it just that on like all the stabbing that happens at the end when the like half of his hand gets chopped off with the butcher knife. So there's something just visually about reminding us like how we can come apart in pieces, basically. That it's like, what his dad David's obsessed with, every all his philosophy and outlook on life is everything is the body, like all realities kind of has to do with the body. But it's like that. It just reminds me of in a body gore human consciousness sense that that story of, or that question of, if you have that original wooden ship and replace, in upkeeping it, you replace all its wood and parts over the years, is it still that original ship?
That's interesting.
That's what's going on for me, like here, with except for humans and human bodies and consciousness, where it's just sort of like it just made me feel that idea. Okay, like if someone's getting chopped up like in pieces and pieces and pieces, let's say somehow being kept alive down to like their brain, and like at what point are they no longer them, or does the consciousness like leave? Could you rebuild it's like what comes up in the ideals of teleportation in The Fly too, like it's a duplicate, but is the consciousness the same? I don't know. So it was really neat for me how the idea of like visceral showing violence kind of really played well into the idea that we're bodies and what does it mean to have a consciousness in a body?
Yeah, we're just meat sacks, right? In the physical aspect of it, but what does that mean? And like, how come we have these other things going on that, like, thoughts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's that all about?
Right.
Freaky. And I like that this kind of movie, this kind of story of consciousness and transferring consciousness, it's like never not fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been around forever, right? Like even Frankenstein
No,
is
before
is this,
that,
right? Like,
how about Vampire?
That's
From the
right, yeah.
20s. His whatever, his astral body gets up and walks out like around in that movie.
yeah, there's just something so intriguing about exploring that idea and all of the possibilities around that idea.
Yeah, because then that gets into zombies or like, and Reanimator, all
Sure.
that.
Who are we? Why are we here? What are we doing?
And I think the movie, now that saying it explicitly, I like how it gets into the point that it's surely not to kill each other.
Yeah, I think that's a good takeaway.
Yeah, I hope so.
I did, there's one other aspect to the Sean Bean thing. I wonder if there isn't a little bit of symbolism, I guess, in him not dying, that like, because he's playing the role of this corporate magnate, super rich guy that the company wants to take down because they want whatever he has, right? They want to take over control of his company and they have to kill him to get that. And to have him be subject to this gruesome beating and mutilation and still not die seems pretty like on the nose in a good way of like, you can't kill that thing. Like in our society right now, that thing is going to survive no matter how hard you poke it with the fire poker. You know what I mean? Like it's just never ending. It's a goddamn cockroach.
The money keeping him alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Great. Well, I would also just love to know so much, Tim, about what did not work for you about this film. So let's do that.
Okay.
Here we go. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
It's strange, but I think what it boils down to is, and maybe this would change in a second viewing, but Tasia, I never felt like we achieved a sense of stakes for her as an individual. And like, the movie's not really set up to have, well, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. And that may be what the problem I have is. There seem to be kind of two directions that I think you could go. And this movie feels like it's riding between them. So one direction is, I have a family. I need to get out of this so I can reclaim my like personhood and the things that mean something to me. That is vaguely there, but I never felt like she needed that.
But yeah, because you kind of seemed to agree when I was saying like it made sense for her character and story that she's so far gone from even being able to consider that.
Right. So then why have the family there at all?
I guess it is because that arc is still there in the sense of they are her last tie to anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even
I guess so. I just think that it's tough. I think it's tough to do both really well or effectively. And I think that it never quite landed quite right. In that, even her relationship with her son, I never felt like there was anything that we were given to care about how she felt about her son.
Yeah.
She seems really disconnected from the son in particular. And like, so I guess what that did is that it undercut the ending to me. It felt like I was like, yeah, okay, I don't know. I think you could have, if we had seen her actually actively recoil from intimacy with her son, if she's so far gone that we go, oh man, she can't even relate and like be close to her own son.
So push it further.
Yes.
Or show it more.
Show it more like one scene that really hammers that home. Then the ending would feel like it landed more for me.
Because, yeah, I definitely think it's good how it is where for a horror movie like this, where it just gives this pervasive dread through everything. Like you think of Hereditary, where it's not like their love is present from the beginning of the movie and then goes sour. It's just dour and sad, the family relations from the get-go.
True, but you understand the stakes and the importance of how they feel underneath.
Yeah. That's
really
kind of where I was going,
clearly, right? Like you know that the mom, Toni Collette, it cares immensely for the well-being of her daughter before anything bad happens. We get that in a couple ways. Like she really adamantly is like, you know, you have to look after her. And just in saying that, like, I don't know how you, like, what a good way to do that in this film would be necessarily off the top of my head, but either more overt disregard for the son in the scene when she comes home and has dinner there, like some sort of rejection of motherhood toward him, something like that, I think would have hammered it home. Now, on the job side so that's like the home life side of it, right? On the job side of it, the stakes of what's going to happen if they don't finish the job don't really exist for me. Because who are we seeing those stakes through? Jennifer Jason Leigh? Right? Not really.
Well, again, but there's no, I don't know, it would kind of undercut the idea that there is no good. There is no like just way to do what they're doing. It's just all this horrible situation to be in.
What's the consequence if it fails? That's, I guess, what I'm saying.
Well, it's so dour that her death doesn't even feel like a consequence. Because like her death could be, but
right. But then why? Why have the story?
For me, it's,
you know what I'm saying though. Like,
yeah,
if we can't get on board with her, like, I get that. Like, a big part of the storyline is her losing touch with herself. But if there's no sort of out, if we don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, good or bad, like a choice, something like that, the external powers that be don't really matter. Like, I don't care if they get the job done because there's no extra like benefit to her.
I hear, yeah, I get what you're saying. I think for me that was like it's not even like hoping that she's not even at the level of hoping she escapes. It's just hoping that she like at least sees that there's maybe, I don't know, it's like there's some kind of little hope there for me when watching it that I did latch onto, but it's just like so buried and so layered. Like you see it. I think the thing that did what you're saying wasn't there for me was it was like the fact that she is keeping a connection with her family, like even though they're separated. And when she's sleeping with her husband or ex-husband or whatever, it was really cool. You see the two extremes of totally disengaged and then like back in the moment with him. Mm-hmm. So that just showed me like on some level, she's still doing the human thing, wanting to connect. Still, you know, maybe even if it feels like so far from it, there's some semblance of possibility of love still there, kind of thing. So I don't know, just in a very just maybe being optimistic about humans, it was able to give me that sense of stakes. That's just always there, but everything that's how it's doing it now, it's just about like making it feel hopeless and like in a horror movie sense that did work for me that I wouldn't want to change. So it's a fine line. Yeah.
Well, and I think maybe I'm maybe kind of repeating myself in a way, but maybe a clearer way to say what I'm feeling is when you have your external goals, which is carry out the job, keep the status quo, like do what the corporate overlords or whatever are telling me to do. That's her external goal. Her internal goal seems to be escape her. It's not really escape her family, is it? Is that right? It is in a way. It's like cut the ties to her family. It's a thing that she cannot quite do, similar to cutting the ties or carrying out the act of her job. She can't bring herself to do it. So those two things match up, right? And so the story evolves and eventually you would want those two things to come back around and collide. And they do in this story. So to me, I guess what feels weird is that when they collide, the story, the writers, I mean, Brandon Cronenberg has written it so that those two, external and internal things come back around and collide. And yet I'm still not feeling connected to either the catharsis or the tragedy of that moment. And so that's kind of where I'm falling off and not going, oh, it really perfectly lands. And maybe I'm just being like, that might be too much to ask. I don't know if it is. Maybe not.
Yeah, it's weird for, I guess, to get
but here's the thing. The story says, essentially, it's never really stated, but the way it ends up is that if she's unable to finish the job, that dude that she's possessing can seek retribution on her and her family. That's the consequences of her not being able to do it. And because she seems so despondent with her family, when that threat arrives, that he's there and he's going to potentially kill her husband and son, I didn't care because she didn't seem to care.
Mm.
That's the problem. And so when Jennifer Jason Leigh shows up in her son's body and she shoots the son, it's almost saying a totally different thing. So maybe that thing that I'm wanting is super antithetical to what Brandon Cronenberg wants.
Yeah, it's weird.
And that's fine.
Because when I'm watching that, I wasn't feeling like I wanted to feel for them. I was just feeling like this is just all horrible and gross.
Yeah.
Well,
that's true. Yeah.
Maybe this is where you're coming from, like, or where you're coming from is affecting how kind of I was viewing it, with what did not work is. And I hate going here. It's, I don't know. Like I'm thinking maybe it's putting it on, maybe it's because of like something, how it's written, like you're saying, but I think it's something more going on where it's like, it doesn't feel like just in the moment when you're watching it, there's as much kind of ephemeral magical depth there at any given point as, let's say, when I turn on Daddy Cronenberg's movie, like Videodrome, whatever it may be, and just from the get-go, you're just like, this is a world I'm in, and you just everything seems so fully realized in there. And my theorizing is that is just something that comes with the more movies you make. It's just then that filter between the essence you're channeling down into the movie becomes, I guess, less and less filtering. So I don't know. That's my initial guess as to what may be happening sometimes with I don't know.
Yeah.
With movies these days, as much as I may love the story and everything.
Right. I agree, and I'm not sure what to exactly point at. But when we just watched the trailer, the soundscape and the music in the trailer felt more world building than the soundscape and music in the actual movie. And I don't know. I'd have to go and like actually dig in and say, okay, what is happening? What's different between these two things? Because the trailer jumped out and I was like, that's what I was expecting to see.
Right. So yeah, there's it on the technical level of okay, the designing of the sounds, whatever. But I guess I'm talking more about like when you look at like, let's say you just look at a famous Annie Leibovitz photo or something, and there's just something about it that's just makes you go, whoa.
Yeah.
But then it feels like you can have someone else capture nearly the exact same image and it's just not quite there. I don't know.
Right.
It's just this weird ephemeral like film magic thing that I'm kind of obsessed with thinking about.
Yeah, for some reason too, I kept thinking, well, not kept thinking, but there were moments where I thought to myself, oh, this is kind of close to what, it's unsuccessfully close to what Under the Skin was successful at. And that may just be, who knows, I don't know.
Yeah, so like that.
Why?
Right.
I don't know exactly how to like articulate what that thing is.
Like something about just when it's a shot of her getting a ride in a car, I just feel like shivers through my whole body.
Why?
Right, exactly. But and I think that's just, well, it is a technical thing, I think, to get when you get that, when you're trying to translate whatever that thing is. I'm talking about it's about making every single technical aspect work towards that.
Right.
But I think maybe the magic side of it is how much sort of just like belief do you have in like the story world as the filmmaker or whatever. And that's like the thing that kind of comes through. But yeah, for whatever reason, that's a good example. For whatever reason, Under the Skin, I just like feel everything way, way more. This one, I didn't as much. Could have anything to do with just the mood I was in, the TV I'm watching it on, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's maybe my disclaimer for this all, but there you go.
Yeah. This is not a great thing to have as what did not work, but I was really almost confused and put off by her husband. And I don't know what it is exactly about. Something felt off. I don't know if it's the acting. I don't know if they had to ADR him or something. But every time he spoke, I was like jarred. And I don't know why. I mean, I don't even want to I'm not trying to badmouth the actor. I'm really not. But something about how that performance was captured in this particular film did not work. I was like, what's happening?
Weird.
I don't get it. Because nobody else made me feel that way in the movie.
Yeah.
And I thought, is this guy not an actor? Or is something, did something just felt off?
Yeah.
I don't know why. But honestly, that's it. There's nothing about the movie really that I was like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
There's just that one sort of component of feeling like this weird story thing didn't land right.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And that actor.
Great. All right, then. Then I think we can move on to our wrap-up section here. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
Got some questions for you here, Tim, that this movie inspired. To just go full dark like we like to here, Tim. It's what horror movies allow us to do. So there's that repeated idea and visual of when she in other bodies is trying to kill herself by shooting herself in the head via putting the gun in her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be the default way you think you would try to kill yourself with a gun?
No way.
I always think you do it right through the head, right?
Yeah.
Why through the mouth? Why is that a thing?
I don't know, but people do it.
Is there something just more dramatic about it?
Maybe there's something about seeing the gun as you pull the trigger.
The certainty of it's in the hole, but even then it can feel like you can miss or something.
Well, I mean, when many people have survived, people have survived the gun to the temple.
Okay.
I've true crime stuff you hear about like people literally having a gun held to their temple and getting shot and it ricocheting weird and not killing them. or even killing, like not even damaging them to such an extent that they're like a vegetable.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not a connoisseur necessarily of suicide. So
maybe it's just more places to kind of bleed out if you do it through your mouth.
I agree, though. Doesn't it seem like if you put it through your mouth that it would just go out the back of your neck and you'd just be like hurt?
Yeah, I guess. But you're saying it works if you just do that through your brain.
Yeah, to the forehead, like right in front. Why aren't people doing that?
God, it's probably happened in reality.
I'm sure it has.
If that happens, where someone survives it, imagine like someone. Whichever way comes first, they shoot themselves in the mouth or the head first. It doesn't do it. So then they have to shoot themselves a second time. Do you think that's happened where it's like self-inflicted head wound 2 shots?
Yes. I'm certain without knowing anything factual that has happened.
I feel like I got to put that in a horror movie.
Oh, man. It's brutal. Well, it's one of those things, too, that it's so unbelievable that if you did put it in a movie, people would be like, this isn't a realistic depiction.
Well, it happens at the end of the Ty West movie, The House, whatever, with someone surviving the initial gunshot to the head. So I think of that. Anyways, other question I had for you. It's cool when you have a movie where it really feels like there's 2 equal leads in a way. Mm-hmm. The end credits came on, and like, let's say you want to give them equal credit, where you had Andrea Riseborough's name was bottom left.
Yep.
And then Christopher Abbott's name was top right. So you think in left to right order, Andrea's name is first. Top bottom, Christopher's name is first.
Right.
So it's supposed to be like, okay, they're like on equal planes. When you see that, does your brain view that that way, that they're equal? Or does Christopher look higher or Andrea look first?
Chris, my reaction was that Christopher was getting a higher billing.
Okay, even though that wouldn't necessarily makes you agree the intention would be equal, right?
Yes, but I didn't like my snap reaction was, oh, he got higher billing.
So then, is there a way to visually show actors with equal billing in a credits card?
Sure.
How?
Put them on the same plane. Maybe, you know what would be cool is if you had, in this particular case as a design, you had both names center frame on top of each other and then they split apart. One goes one way, one goes the other. So you initially see that
would be a little distracting. I guess it'd work for this movie.
Yeah, for this movie.
Wise.
No, I think it's tough. And also it's a contractual issue.
Yeah.
So who knows?
I'm just trying to think. I thought that was an interesting question of this was their aim. It, at least to my brain, doesn't quite do that. Same with yours.
He got more screen time for sure.
True.
So it may, I guess if you're going off of that, you notice they did do in order alphabetical in order of they did in order of appearance for the scroll. So they are actively trying to avoid saying, one person gets higher or lower billing.
Yeah.
You're just saying, screw it. Just here you go. This is how you saw them.
Just fun exercise if you can do that or not.
I'm prone to, like, I've done 2 films really that had 2 main sort of leads. And I'm very prone to having the woman's name be on the left and the man's name be on the right, but having them be on the same plane. I don't know. That's just, and part of that is story related because both of those films are, the lead truly is actually the woman in both of those.
The only thing I can think of is if you have them like spiraling with each, or like circling. They're like outlining a circle together, just turning around. That's the only way I could think of.
That also would probably be very distracting.
Yeah. It has to be fast enough. It's like there's not one that comes in first.
Right.
Kind of. Okay, great. So some things about this movie. Thought that was interesting that apparently while developing the movie in pre-production, Brandon Cronenberg found himself gathering inspiration from the films of Dario Argento, particularly a film that we loved and dismembered, Opera.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and this is me just reading from an IMDb trivia thing, but thought this was really fun since I liked this moment a lot. Brandon Cronenberg said he originally wrote the scene in which Voss has sex with the intention of showing Voss as having a penis, but he subsequently edited the script, knowing some actors would not feel comfortable with it. Upon casting Andrea Riseborough, the two had a conversation during which Riseborough suggested the idea of Voss having male genitalia, which delighted Cronenberg and made him feel like she was reading his mind. The scene was rewritten back to its original form, and what is seen on on film is what Cronenberg initially envisioned.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's always nice. Because we just saw Crimes of the Future, and I just happened to notice this the title card or whatever you call it for Neon also was on this. So I'm like, what is Neon? Is Neon a production company? Is it a distribution company? It happens to be in reality both. But I think it's interesting that, and noteworthy, I guess, just that you start to see these companies popping up in the realm, this like new independent horror realm. A24 obviously is sort of a well-known one. Now I'm seeing Neon a lot. I'm sure there's a couple others that
I like. Spectre Vision.
Yeah, Spectre Vision, of course. So I'm and like 10 years ago, I feel like that did not exist. Like, I don't feel like there were these sort of smaller, maybe not smaller, but these companies that kind of were building a branded name recognition and like a consistency in the type of films that they were releasing or distributing. The only one that I remember seeing a lot back in the day was like Castle Rock. Castle Rock, is that what it is?
I know what you're talking about. The ones that did like 13 Ghosts
exactly.
And all that, yeah.
And Blumhouse, right? Those,
which came after that, yeah.
Right. Those are the two that stick out. And the style of movie that those companies were making was very, very different, even though it's still in the horror realm.
Right. So if that's true, I'd agree that at least observing, to the best of my memory, that does feel that way. If
Who knows if that's true.
Right. But if that is, because you always had full moon features,
there was also
existed.
Like Ghost House or something
that
like
was
that.
The one
right?
that was, yeah, that's the one. Was that the Sam Raimi one? Ghost House?
I don't remember.
Anyways, I wonder if, again, if that is true, I guess that could be a response to just studio movies aren't making them as often as much anymore.
Maybe that's what I'm getting at.
When you look at films that like Vampire's Kiss we just did, it was crazy to think, oh, this is, had, a studio behind it, whatever, but it had the budget of like a mega indie. Like these equivalent movies were still being done by studios or whatnot. So, and I think this just speaks to horror is something that does always have its place and niche. So if the studios stopped feeling comfortable doing it, someone else was going to take up that marketplace.
And maybe what we're seeing is the studio, like that the filmmakers and that these companies are elevating the filmmakers in their actual vision more, and they are becoming the go-to companies for that. Because I don't know if this is true, this is total speculation, but maybe that's in response to studios wanting to have too much sort of say in how the film is made or what's acceptable for their studio to like take on. I think of that only insofar as like all of these times, these anecdotes we've heard about newer filmmakers being given a really big property like a superhero film or something like that, and being under Warner Brothers or Disney or whatever, like these giant companies, and the movie just not being good, and you go, well, what happened? And the reports, like sort of like the underground reports, are always that the studio just was meddling and would not let the filmmaker make the movie that they were hired to make. And so this is all conjecture. Like, I don't know what's really going on, but I hope and wonder, or I wonder and hope that maybe this is part of what's happening, that these smaller independent distribution companies are getting wise to allowing filmmakers and elevating what they actually want to do. And then you get these really cool avant-garde or just crazy films that like they're the ones I want to be watching. Like I don't like I'll go see the Marvel movies, but like I don't see them because I think they're going to be good.
Though you do love them.
I love them, but I love them for a particular reason, and it's not the filmmaking.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's a totally different thing. And so, and that's not to take anything away from the filmmaking of those movies. It's just, that's not why I'm going, right? I want to see Possessor specifically for the filmmaking.
Yeah.
I want to see Hereditary for the filmmaking, right? Like that's incredibly exciting.
Yeah. And I realized, I don't know if I'm quite catching myself from earlier, but the like studios, it's interesting. They do have their subsidiary companies the Screen Gems, the Legendary Pictures that, releases the Godzilla films and all that. Where I wonder, I don't know, again, just conjecture, but if they're almost like the in-between.
Yeah. Probably.
Kind of feel of how much is allowed or not, so to speak.
And I think it all also comes down to a lot of the time who has been given the reins for those subsidiaries, right? Like, to take a really big example, Marvel Studios way back when they were in kind of deep shit and didn't own a lot of their IP anymore because they had just given them out to other companies to save themselves from bankruptcy, hire a guy like Kevin Feige, and they just say, you know what? We're going to just let you do the thing that you think you want to do. We're going to kind of just see if it works.
I mean, I look towards the Godzilla movies, which I do love. There's they got Gareth Edwards, who did the indie movie Monsters, to do the first one, and then Mike Doherty of Krampus and Trick or Treat fame has done like the last couple. So
yeah,
there's that.
Yeah, I do think that. I mean, I'm biased. I'm super biased. When I think about the bureaucratic kind of non-filmmaker in charge structure that exists in a lot of realms, and it exists on a small scale as well as a big scale, right? The powers that be so often not being filmmakers, and how that can and often does get in the way of either a good film being made or a film being made well. It's really frustrating.
Well, that ties it back to the movie we referenced at the beginning, The Grudge.
Yeah.
Where it's like, after seeing the dude's other movies, you are like, there's no way this wasn't just all studio interference that ruined this, which was Screen Gems, which I think might have that
reputation
record. Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Listen to that review, folks.
I've never seen Ryan stare at the ceiling in a movie theater more.
I was upset. Not since Battle LA.
Oh God.
Okay, let's wrap it up with Possessor here. Finish off with some recommendations for us all. Tim, I want to recommend a documentary on HBO Max called 15 Minutes of Shame. It's kind of like produced and featuring Monica Lewinsky. But it's all about how like that internet bullying culture is done in a really like careful, interesting way. And it just had this story in it that just is the kind of like anecdote I just love so much, which was the story of this guy is not a white guy who was driving by the protests for is during the Black Lives Matter movement, or when all the protests were happening, and like someone snapped a photo of him on his way to work when he's driving by a protest where he was fidgeting with his hands, he says, and at the moment he went like that with his fingers, it was like him making what I guess like a lot of white supremacists kind of sign make.
Yeah.
And that picture of him doing that went viral and basically like ruined his life in the worst kind of ways, fired from his job like when he needed it the most ever in his life kind of thing. It was just one of those like insane like what is the world anymore stories that I just kind of find like cathartic in a way, just to have light shed on them, just to show like, I don't know, nuance does reign supreme and like letting people tell their story. Great stuff like that in there, and just fun stories that were kind of like that of people who weren't doing anything wrong, but yet there's through some just little like kind of careful, just how it all played out. They just became these victims of these like crazy internet. I don't know, what do you call it? Bullying, whatever.
Yeah.
But 15 minutes of shame. It was super interesting. It's good to hear from Monica. Check it out.
Cool. I will recommend Dead, a book I'm rereading, which I think is just sort of one of the, I don't know, it's like an essential sort of reading for any filmmaker. It's called Making Movies. It's Sidney Lumet's, I don't know what you would call it, just memoir. It's not really a memoir. I don't know what it is. It's just his
musings.
Yeah, his musings on filmmaking. But it's great. I really love, there's like, I think it's in the foreword. He's talking about how, or maybe it's in the first page or whatever of the book, but he says, you know, he asked Akira Kurosawa how he came up with the framing of this particular shot in, I don't know, Ron or something like that. And Kurosawa was like, well, if I move the camera an inch to the left, I'd see like an airport. And if I moved it to an inch to the right, I'd see like a power plant. That's it. And I love that kind of, I don't know, anecdote or insight of just like, sometimes you get what you get because you're there doing it.
Yeah.
And I said this to a kid the other day who was he's at the like UCLA, whatever it's called, adjunct something.
Extension.
Yeah, that. And he's probably 21 or whatever. And he was like, do you have any like advice or whatever? I was like, yeah, just make stuff. Like now you can do that. You can get your friends together and you can just go make things. And it doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't even have to be good, but you will benefit so much more from doing things right now. If you have an idea, you go shoot it that weekend. Then what I did, which was kind of hem and haw and like try to rewrite and write and make it perfect and whatever. And then I have, a handful of scripts that have been sitting around for 10 years. That sucks. Don't do that.
Just got to set a date.
Yeah. Like make the thing and then remake it if you don't like how it came out, and then remake that and rewrite that or whatever. Use what you felt was working for that project and put it into a different one. I mean, we know that great filmmakers have been doing that forever. Right? Like go watch any of Sam Raimi's movies. They all have pieces of his other movies in them.
Yeah.
So, there's nothing wrong with that. Just go make stuff. But the book, yeah, it's a good book.
Great. These are not my recommendations, but just segue so perfectly from that. I can recommend, not recommend it. I just finished rereading actually Akira Kurosawa's book, Something Like an Autobiography.
Cool.
It's great, inspiring, a lot of fun. And I'll also recommend, if you're just looking for good filmmaking inspiration, we dismembered One Cut of the Dead here.
Yeah.
Which is great. And there's an episode of that of Joe Bob Briggs's show on Shudder that where they cover One Cut of the Dead, and he just gives a great sort of inspirational spiel on independent filmmaking and to go out and do it. So just in the spirit of what you're suggesting and talking about here, I'll mention those two things.
Cool.
Great. All right. Well, that's it for today, folks. So in closing, remember, killing people's bad. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, don't kill anybody, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.